thank you for having this conversation today. We do a lot of work with first-time founders. And many times when we meet a first-time founder, it's when they're on the journey to hiring one of their first, if not the first product manager. And I thought there would be no one better than you to share from your rich career as a multi-time founder, all of the lessons and the insights that you have that would help a first-time founder make their first PM hire. So, Ron, why don't you tell us, who are you, by the way? Who is Ron? Tell us about you and your journey as a founder.
So, by the way, I have to just say I love your energy. So happy to answer that. Yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm Ron, founder and CEO of a company called Uplinq Financial Technologies based in Toronto and Atlanta. To your point, I am a serial entrepreneur. Uplinq is my fifth. And as I've been told many times, it's my last startup. So, we're somewhat excited about sort of this being the final hurrah. But really, if you're asking who am I, I'm an immigrant. And my family came here in the early 70s. And I know it's hard to believe because, yes, I agree, I look exceptionally young. So I appreciate you saying that. But we were poor. And, my dad's first job was actually baking bread at night. And after a year, he went to a bank here in Toronto, 1973, and he applied for a small business loan. And the banker said to him, Mr. Benegbi, you don't qualify for how the bank lends to small business. However, there's something about you, and I have a little bit of leverage, and I'm going to grant you a $5,000 loan. Now, in 1973, obviously a different world. It's a lot of money today, but in 1973, that was a great deal of money. So my dad was able to start a small business, and eventually that evolved over time. My mom followed suit about a year or so later. And it really, for me, a couple things. For our family, I should say, gave us a springboard. It became our foundation to a new life in a new country. It gave us a shot. And for me, I saw firsthand the struggles both my dad and my mom went through as small business owners and operators and just running the business day to day in terms of access to capital, cash flow, all of that great stuff that goes into running a small business. And hence that's really tied into the core mission and value system at Uplinq. So, what we do at Uplinq is we enable small business lending to run in a much smarter way through advanced data and credit decisioning models. So in English, what does that mean? What does that mean? We didn't build some great tech in a basement with PhDs and come out with a narrative around AI this, AI that. That's not our story. Our story was we did something a little bit unusual. We actually took a product, and that's really key. A product was really important to us to have that level of credibility selling to a bank from day one. We took a product that had been built over a 15-year window, and we simply repurposed it into a modern day fintech. So what that did was it gave us immediate credibility with bankers that most fintech startups would never get. And we were always able to use the narrative, yes, we're a fintech startup. And of course, we understand that you as a financial institution have your reservations and concerns. What we'd like to add is while we as a company are very young, our technology is not. It's highly mature. It's been tested and vetted over a long window of time. It has served many lenders, big and small, in many markets all over the world. It has access to a lot of information, and it's highly intelligent and intuitive. And we're able to leverage insights from real world programs, not theoretical programs built by a great, AI tool, but real life, real world programs to ultimately deliver a better product to your customers. So that's a little bit about me and how, that ties into the Uplinq narrative. And, I'd say especially in the last couple of years, we've really seen that narrative start to resonate with the market that we're trying to serve.
Beautiful. What a story. What a story. I'd love to sort of go back to that time a few years ago when it was the point where it was time to think about and ultimately hire your first product manager at Uplinq. And so take us back to that time and what was happening in the business and what led you to believing that was the moment. Where were things at? Talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that. Mhm.
So the company was incorporated in April 2021. And even then, I was really on the fence about, I actually wanted to bring in a product manager or a product founder even at that point. And for one reason or another, that didn't happen. But I knew that given what we were trying to do in the market we were trying to serve, that would be a critical component. And then what happened was a few months into the journey, this was around the summer, early fall of 21, we as an organization did, I wouldn't call it a major pivot, but it was a pivot in strategic direction of the company, which is normal for a lot of startups, right? It's nothing unusual. And we had a new founder join the team, and that's my co-founder, who's really the brains behind this. I'm the beauty, he's the brains. He is a genius at a different level, but that's a story for another day. And as that was happening, my sense of, okay, now that we're making this pivot and we're going to take a couple months to really get the product right, we really need someone here full time to focus on the product. And so that's what we did. We ended up, saying we wanted to do this. Yes, we engaged you. So Heidi's great for anyone who wants to know or not. So we engaged you, and over a few months, you did find us someone who checked a lot of those boxes for us, and we were really excited to bring him on board. But the interesting thing is, Heidi, even before we had engaged you, and as we were going through that process with you, because it is a process, I actually went out. I'm very involved in a community here in Toronto called Mars, and I actually hired a consultant who worked through Mars as a senior product manager, senior. You could even argue that he was at the CPO level. You could argue that. And he helped us for a couple of months until this transition was happening. And then eventually we made that hire, and he was aware of that. So he was great. It really ended up working out. So that's where the business was, and why we ended up doing that. And yeah, it was definitely the right decision at that right time.
Beautiful. So, the journey to hiring really anyone, it's often a journey, and a lot of things get discovered along the way. I'd love to know, what did you discover in the journey to hiring that first product manager? What surprised you? What was unexpected? Talk a little bit about that journey.
So we were, again, obviously it's tied to our company and what we're doing, and we're selling a very complex product
Mm.
to a bank, a product that impacts how they think about credit, how they think about risk, a product that, while it doesn't make a credit decision on behalf of a bank, it gets them to think about the credit decision. And because of that, our product falls under a regulatory purview. So unlike most fintechs who go in, let's say to a bank, tough sales cycle, long sales cycle, but then once they're through that, it's over. For us, it's not over. We then have to, after we get all the business approvals, get the regulators to buy in. And that's something that's been new to me. So we were looking, I wanted I wanted a number of things. We had, a big checklist. There were three things that were really, really important to me. One was, does the individual have any type of lending or credit experience? obviously related to our business, highly relevant because you are our customer is a banker. It's someone who lends money to small business. So if you're able to speak their language, at least to a certain point, that would be great. So that was a very important piece of it. The second piece was I wanted somebody who had somewhat of an entrepreneurial spirit. They didn't necessarily have to be a previous founder. That's okay. But maybe they joined startups in the past, or maybe they joined companies that weren't as mature, but not just somebody who came from a bank, like someone who understand what it's like to, roll up your sleeves, work nonstop, and do what you need to do to grow a business. And then the third thing was, and this is near and dear to my heart, is I wanted this individual to have the ability to sell. Because we weren't in a position to go out and hire a sales team or a marketing team. So while the individual was not responsible for business development, however, in the context of the sales cycle, there are, a lot of selling moments. And, I'd argue it's always a selling moment until you have not just a contract, but until the money is in the bank. I wanted the individual to be able to understand how to talk to a customer and how to help that customer become more comfortable with our product, but ultimately, have some sort of sales influence on that individual. So those were three very important things. I would tell you that the individual we ended up hiring, whom we don't need to mention the person's name, to some degree hit all three. But what was really interesting for me was as we went through that process, it was clear that there was definitely a shortfall in all three. And I'd say really in two of the three was a bigger shortfall. And, as a group, we had to make the decision, do we compromise? Do we just keep going? And because, we felt that we really needed help at that time and that we did really like this individual, there were a lot of really great things about the individual that we really did like. And I think for us, we also felt that he would fit in culturally because he seemed like a nice person and then we'd all sort of get along and that's important. And we ended up making the move and, with your help, of course, and they ended up leaving, a pretty secure job at a very, I would imagine they're a Fortune 500 company to come work for no-name startup Uplinq. So, that was the journey. It was an interesting journey. Certainly, if I were to go through it again, I might have a different perspective or lens on it, simply just going through the process already. But it was it was fun. We actually met some really interesting people. I remember a few of the interviews, and yeah, no, it was a fun process, and I'm glad we did what it did, and I think it worked out for all parties.
I really like the fact that you were able to boil down sort of so many, sort of the dream and the requirements of what you were looking for into three concise, sort of non-negotiables and trying to evaluate who would embody enough of all three of those things to be the right match. You talked about the lending, the credit experience. So I sort of label that as domain expertise, someone who would understand the category. You talked about somebody who embodies an entrepreneurial spirit. And that's so fascinating because if someone doesn't appreciate or have that model of I'm going to say almost cultural alignment, it's not going to work in a startup, wouldn't you
It
agree?
can be very problematic,
Very.
and many people believe they have that or it's
Yes.
not a big deal. And
Yes.
I will tell you, it is a big deal because to your point, me and my co-founder, we couldn't be more polar opposites as people, as human beings, but we are so aligned. Like both of us are always, plugged in, always there, for one another, for the company.
Yeah.
And if you have one individual who's not aligned, yes, it could be very problematic.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the idea of someone being ready to step into the selling moments. I liked the language that you used there because yeah, I mean, everyone needs to be selling. Everyone needs to be thinking about the commercial success of the business and trying to advance what you're working so hard to build. And
Yeah, I mean, as a sales guy, hardcore sales guy here, BD sales guy, ABC always be closing. I don't think we needed someone at that level always be closing, but someone who could relate to a customer.
yeah,
And
yes,
when I say selling, just have a business conversation with them that, they find valuable. And that's a selling moment. And that creates influence and trust. And something that's done over a period of time, and especially in our case, because our sales cycles are longer than most, if you're able to build influence and trust and confidence, then it's a lot easier to get that customer when it's time to sign the contract over the finish line.
I love it. Final question for you. Looking back on the whole experience, what do you sort of remember and think about in terms of how one hire can change the trajectory of a business, or what might be some advice that you would give to a first-time founder who's just starting to think about hiring their first PM?
Yeah, I think it's like any role. It's you got to weigh the good with the bad. The compromise we made was this individual was a little bit more senior and cost a lot more money. And so that I had to think about that very carefully versus the impact and value that individual could deliver. And as I thought about it, I felt that the positive would outweigh, the cost at the end of the day to a startup company who's venture backed. That's a big thing. And then sure enough, it did. He was able to come in here within the first 12 months. We had a great product demo built, and that's very, very important. We basically sell data at the end of the day, and it's done through an API. And good luck trying to demo an API. So we make it very clear to customers that we're not, yes, we're showing you a front end UI here. We're not trying to sell you that, but it's the only way we can demo it. Otherwise, like what do we send you a data file? So, and it's a great, and that has evolved over time. But it was really, really good. He helped build us a good explainer video. Oh, he was really good at better than me at like conferences and events. He was actually exceptional at that. Like, except he was really good at, talking to people, meeting people, not necessarily on the sales side, but just in terms of because he's a nice person and he had a good energy to him and people would be comfortable with him. And so I saw a lot of value in that. He was able to take a lot of pressure off me with respect to we were attending a lot of conferences, we were sponsoring a lot of events, we had booths, we had kiosks. So he was extremely helpful there. And yeah, and at the end of the day, it freed up my time, right, as the CEO of the company to focus on other things like day-to-day sales or BD, marketing initiatives, and of course, finances and operations. So, when I look back at it, it was definitely the right hire at the right moment of time. And I think it always comes down to that. So, if you, as a founder, you're evaluating, is this your moment? Is this the right moment of time? It's something that you need to give careful weight and thought to. It's something that, you should go through a process. And whatever your process is great because it fits you. But you should go through it because in an early stage company like we were then, we still are today, but a lot earlier back then, taking a swing and missing, and I'm a baseball dude, so by the way, the Jays should have absolutely won the World Series, but don't get me started on that. But taking a swing and miss has a much bigger implication when you're early on versus if you're a more mature company with, let's say, a few hundred employees. You're going to swing and miss just inherently, but you can absorb that. It is much more difficult to absorb that when you're a team of five and you've got really limited funds. So you don't want to swing and miss. Not that you ever do, but you really don't at that moment in
Mm.
time. So is it your moment in time? That's what you have to ask yourself and get to the answer that you're most comfortable with. So.
Ron, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing these insights. And I have no doubt it's going to be helpful to a founder listening today and coming to this decision point in their business. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me and, keep doing all the great work you're doing out there, Heidi.
Awesome. Thank you.
Keep that energy flowing. Thanks so much.